Welcome to the RIMP Code video series. This segment will focus on explicit intervention in writing composition. Skilled writing composition includes the formulating of ideas through knowledge of topics, word choice, organizational structures, and sentence structure. Models of writing development show that writing depends on using many thinking and language skills together. Personal factors like focus, memory, and self-control work with background knowledge and skills like spelling and handwriting to turn ideas into written words. Needless to say, writing is very complex. An intervention focus for writing composition is appropriate for students with the following characteristics. These students generally have sufficient oral vocabulary and language about certain topics. You may find the student has background knowledge that contributes to the development of their writing. But when it comes to getting the words on the page, the student has difficulty selecting written words that are appropriate to topic and audience. Now, this could be due to vocabulary issues or transcription issues that we discussed in another segment. The student may also have difficulty in constructing written grade-level sentences with appropriate syntax and elaboration. These sentences may appear choppy, simple, or incomplete. The student with writing composition needs also may have difficulty in developing cohesive and well-organized written paragraphs. The writing is just not coherent. It may lack organization and include extraneous details that aren't relevant to the topic. Or it could be there's a combination of any of these areas. Consider a hierarchy of skills, strategies, and techniques for intervention. This video will discuss word, sentence, and paragraph level interventions. While this series is intended to support students on RIMPs, these practices can also be applied to general classroom instruction to support writing development. Remember, writing is best supported through the text and topics students are learning in class. Writing instruction should focus on integrating these concepts. Let's begin with strategies to support word selection in student writing. It's important to set students up for success in their writing. A writer needs to know something to write something. Thinking is required in order to write. Writing begins with strategies that help access and produce the right words, allowing for rich and meaningful phrases and sentences. High-interest topics and text are essential in vocabulary and writing instruction. Create engaging environments for vocabulary teaching by using compelling topics that encourage debate and the sharing of opinions. Students flagged for writing intervention may have rich background knowledge in selected topics. However, this is not necessarily reflected in their writing. They may use fewer written words, limited vocabulary, and have issues with spelling. Translating thoughts into writing starts with teaching students strategies to generate words and word forms to develop rich and meaningful phrases and sentences. Writing composition instruction should be contextualized to student experiences with text and topics of classroom instruction. To get students started in their writing, support them in using the text to generate noun and verb boxes of words they will use in their writing. While generating these lists, it might be helpful to stretch out long words by their sounds and syllables to support spelling. Finally, help students organize the words using semantic mapping. Let's watch a short lesson where a teacher might help a student generate topic-centered vocabulary using a noun and verb box, and then create a semantic feature map. All right, so today we are going to start to plan for our descriptive paragraph about the coral reef. And we're going to start by generating a list of nouns and verbs that are associated with the coral reef. So I want you to go back into our passage that we have been reading, and we're going to make a list of nouns and verbs that we will use later on in a semantic map, and then eventually to help us write the sentences for our paragraph. So let's go ahead and start by making a table. I'll start mine up here with noun and verbs. All right, so let's go back into the passage and let's generate a list of nouns that are associated with the coral reef. And you can use your passage to pull some of those out. Okay, so I see that we have algae, fish, seashells. This is one that I need to stretch out. Anemones. And then we also have crustacean. Okay, good. All right, now let's take a look at some verbs, things that these organisms in the coral reef might do. All right, so we've got feed, filter. That's right, because you were reading about how the sponge helps and acts as a filter for the water to clean it. All right, certainly these animals that are in the coral reef have to protect themselves, and the coral reef itself protects the environment. Animals attach themselves. And then finally, we were reading about how the coral reef helps to keep the shoreline and the coastline from eroding. Okay, good. So now we're going to be using some of these words, and we're going to continue to map out our thoughts so that we can use them to write our sentences a little bit later. So, of course, our descriptive paragraph is going to be about the coral reef. So I'm going to write that in the center and draw a circle around it. And I want to think about oops, let me erase that there. I want to think about 4 aspects of the coral reef. I want to think about its biodiversity, right? The different kinds of life that live in the coral reef. I want to think about the purpose of the coral reef, right? What it does, right? What does it serve for the environment? I want to think about the impact of humans on the coral reef. And then I also want to think about different protective aspects of the coral reef, right? So even though humans have had an impact on the coral reef, they are doing some things to protect it. So let's start with biodiversity, the different life forms that we find in the coral reef. And we can return back to our noun and verb box to help us with that. So remember, we said there were types of algae. There are fish, lots of different kinds of fish in the coral reef. There are seashells, which can be home to some of the animals in the coral reef. There's that big word, anemones are in the coral reef. And then, of course, we have that term crustacean, right? Those shelled animals, those shelled fish. Okay, so the purpose of the coral reef. When I look back in the passage and when we look back to see what the purpose of the reef is, it provides food for many living organisms. It also provides shelter for these animals. And with that shelter, they have means of protecting themselves. And the coral reef actually does, and we can write about this in the descriptive paragraph, the coral reef actually does protect the coastline from further erosions. Now, if you remember in our passages, humans have kind of had a devastating effect on the coral reef. Yeah, so if you remember, I hear you saying that humans can cause pollution, and there is overfishing, meaning that when humans come in and start to fish in the coral reef, it reduces the number of organisms that are living in that coral reef. But at the same time, humans are trying to do some things to protect the coral reef. They're doing a lot of studying, right, about the animals that are there. And they're trying different means of conservation, right? Conservation. And this conservation is helping to further add and further populate the organisms and the biodiversity that is in the coral reef. So eventually we're going to be taking this semantic map and even some of the nouns and verbs that we generated, and we're going to use them to write the sentences that will then become the paragraph in our paragraph about biodiversity and the coral reef. Let's think about how we support students from moving from the word level to the sentence writing level. It is well documented in the research that strong sentence skills are an important predictor of writing quality. Strong writing does not just happen. Writing is an extremely complex skill, and students need direct instruction on combining words and phrases into complete sentences. Starting with text from content areas, teachers can use a sentence combining approach to explicitly guide students from writing simple sentences to constructing more complex ones with embedded clauses. This explicit instruction enhances sentence writing, story development, and overall writing complexity. Just like reading, teaching writing with a structured literacy approach means instruction should be incremental and sequential. Students need instruction and practice writing simple sentences, compound sentences, and complex sentences. These sentence types should be taught according to grade level standards and then teach students to use their semantic feature map or other graphic organizer for sentence construction. Again, writing is best taught through what students are learning in their listening and reading. This supports how they speak and write about topics. Students may write choppy sentences, so teaching sentence combining is a way of merging smaller sentences or even parts of sentences into larger ones. This helps students avoid short, choppy sentences or even redundant sentences. Scaffolding templates like sentence stems and sentence pattern builders can help students to expand a sentence. Let's look at how a teacher might use a scaffolding template. In this example, the teacher prompts the student to build upon a two-word sentence using the template as a scaffold. Eventually, the student adds more detail while keeping the kernel or core of the sentence intact. You can pause the video to take a moment to review the template and consider how it might be used with your students. Now let's think about how we put all of this together in paragraph level principles using strategies and techniques. Various mechanisms could be used to build from the sentence level to the paragraph. Again, oral rehearsal can support written expression as well as writing about topics students have knowledge of through experiences or text. It's also important to teach the components of a paragraph and use a framework to support a fully developed paragraph. A paragraph framework helps to support students with language learning difficulties. These students often struggle to pick up language patterns through casual exposure. So when it comes to writing, they typically require structured strategies to help them begin and end their paragraphs. Additionally, the sentences within the body of the paragraph may need additional support or scaffolding. The table on the slide represents a general framework for scaffolding a descriptive paragraph about the coral reef. This paragraph level activity was part of a broader unit on coral reefs, and the teacher also implemented interventions at the word and sentence levels to help students craft both the topic and the concluding sentences. You can see parts of the table are not complete, so you can think about and perhaps pause the video to think about how you might support your students in completing the remainder of the framework. Reading and writing are built upon a foundation of oral language skills. And with organized instruction that includes content vocabulary, both oral and written expression can be developed in an interactive and complementary way. Many students require practical, hands-on techniques at the word, sentence, and paragraph levels to strengthen their writing abilities. Recommendation 2 and 3 of the IES Practice Guide, Teaching Elementary Students to Be Effective Writers, will support your instruction. We also encourage you to check out the Literacy Academy On Demand course, Writing Syntax and Paragraph Skills, which identify practices to support composition writing. The meta-analysis Writing to Read will help examine writing practices that enhance student reading. And Writing Next describes 11 elements of effective adolescent writing instruction. As you plan explicit interventions in writing composition, Remember, Ohio has an approved list of evidence-based reading intervention programs. The routines described in this video may already be embedded within an approved program that specifically supports word, sentence, and paragraph level writing. Composition writing is a complex process, and as we stated at the beginning of the video, the practices described in this video will benefit all learners, not just those on reading improvement monitoring plans.